Hi, everyone. Welcome to a deep dive into community eligibility in the 2023-2024 school year, hosted by the Food Research and Action Center. I'm Steve Hayward, FRAC's Communications Manager. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few brief housekeeping items. We expect this webinar to run about 30 minutes. We are recording the presentation and will send the recording and slides in a follow-up email. Closed captioning is available. To turn captions on, click the CC button in the bottom taskbar and select English as the spoken language. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. To ask a question at any time, please use the Q&A panel. With that, I'll pass it off to Erin Kennedy Heisem, Senior Child Nutrition Policy Analyst at FRAC. Take it away, Erin.
Thanks, Steve, and welcome everyone to FRAC's Thursday webinar, Community Eligibility, the Key to Hunger-Free Schools. We are so excited to be here today to share with you data from our annual research report on CEP. It's been a long time coming and we have some fantastic findings. But before we dive into that, I really just want to take a minute to thank all of the partners who were so instrumental in getting this report across the finish line. From our funders to USDA to our state advocates, but I want to give a special shout out to the state agencies. State agencies are such an integral link in the child nutrition chain, and they really work with all of the players across the board, from schools and school districts to USDA to state and national advocates. And we would not have been able to get this data and to do this report today if it were not for the state agencies' continued help. Really, they went above and beyond their normal job duties to answer questions and clarify data and check data. So I just wanted to start the webinar today with a big thank you and shout out to all of our state agencies out there for all the work that you do every day to support children being well nourished and ready to learn. Next slide, Steve. So as always, we have a lot to talk about and not a ton of time, so we're going to jump right into it. I'm going to start off with a little level setting to ground us and remind us about how amazing community eligibility is and all of the benefits of this program for both students and families and school nutrition operators, schools, and communities. Then I'll discuss some of our methodology and the timeline for this report. We'll focus on our findings and all of the great data that we have about last school year. We'll wrap up with our recommendations on how we can strengthen CEP even further into the next school year, and we'll touch on some resources. As Steve mentioned, we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A, so you can enter your questions at any point throughout the webinar using that little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to them at the very end. Next slide, please. So as I'm sure all of you on this call know, community eligibility has been instrumental in increasing children's access to healthy school meals. What the research shows us is that CEP reduces childhood hunger and childhood food insecurity. But it goes even a step further by combating household food insecurity as well. Research says that when a child from a food insecure household attends a CEP school, household food security strengthens because it stretches that household food budget. If you're a parent or you're a guardian and you're struggling with food insecurity in your household, you are going to feed your child first and yourself last. But if you know that your child can get a healthy breakfast and a healthy lunch at school, that's going to give you some resources back to help nourish yourself as well. We also know that school meals are the healthiest meals that the American school child sees in a given day, regardless of income level. Children who eat school meals have higher intakes of such important healthful foods to our health and development. They eat higher amounts of whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and low-fat dairy. They have better intakes of micronutrients. And so children who are exposed to these, who have access to these meals, have a better diet quality, which benefits them in their health in the long run throughout the rest of their life. We also know CEP increases school meal participation, right? When you level that playing field and you make meals free to all students, you eliminate that stigma, the stigma that's sometimes present in a cafeteria. And you increase nutrition equity and increase participation in the programs, and then more students have access to all the benefits of school meals, from increased attention spans to better behavior, reduced nursing visits, improved attendance rates. All of the key elements that set a child up for learning and academic success. CEP contributes to that success. Next slide, please. But we also know CEP benefits the school nutrition operator and the operations itself. I like to say CEP is smart business for school nutrition departments. It really cuts through that bureaucratic red tape and reduces the administrative burdens of having to collect and process and verify school meal applications. When you eliminate school meal applications and you rely on direct certification, you are increasing program integrity and you are giving time back to school nutrition departments so that they can focus on their mission and what they love to do, which is feed students. It improves operational efficiencies. You can move children through a line faster. It increases labor productivity, and it eliminates school meal debt. We know that since the end of those pandemic era waivers, many schools have been burdened with increased school meal debt, and they've had to fill these roles of being debt collectors. They've had to pull money from their general funds. CEP eliminates that worry and that concern, again, giving time and freedom back to the school nutrition department so that they can invest their energy in things like farm to school, scratch cooking, school wellness, and all the great things that they're really focused and wanting to do. Next slide, please. So here's a little bit of our timeline over the last year. It was slightly different than in previous years, but starting in May of 2023, as most of you may know, state agencies are required to publish a list of eligible schools and CEP eligible school districts. So FRAC goes and we gather all of these eligibility lists from every state agency, and that forms the basis of what we consider to be CEP eligible schools and districts. And then in September of last year, I reached out to state agencies and I asked for participation data. I said, can you please provide us a list of all the schools that are participating in CEP? Tell me what district they're in, tell me what their student enrollment is, and tell me what their poverty level is. What is their ISP, the identified student percentage? And when possible, if possible, can you give me the ISP that they use for claiming, or they're grouping ISP? So if a school is grouped together with another school or a district is participating as a whole, what is that collective ISP used to determine federal reimbursement? And about 2 weeks after I sent that email out, USDA released their final rule on CEP. So as we all know, starting in last October, USDA lowered the participation threshold for CEP from 40% ISP to 25% ISP. USDA also allowed state agencies to apply for a waiver allowing mid-year adoption, meaning if a state applied for a waiver, that schools within that state could elect to participate in CEP at this new lower threshold after the start of the school year. USDA gave states until March 31st, 2024 to allow newly eligible schools to come on. However, each state adopted a different timeline for when they would allow schools to adopt at this newer threshold. So that extended our data analysis period for last year all the way till April. So we collected, or the data collection period. So we collected data from September to the end of March. Then we scrubbed the data, merged eligibility and participation files, analyzed the data, and that takes us to today. Next slide, please, Steve. Just so we understand when we say eligibility, what we're talking about, since not every state applied for that waiver, allowing schools to adopt at the newer threshold, we kept eligibility for this report at that 40% ISP. So in the report, a district is determined eligible to participate if it has at least one school with 40% ISP or a school was already participating. Then the district was determined eligible. Same thing for the school. A school was determined eligible to participate if it had 40% or higher ISP, or if it was already indicated on that participation list. Next slide, please. And so here we get to it, the data and the findings from last school year. Huge numbers coming out regarding CEP adoption and participation for last school year. Starting at the school district level, over 7,700 school districts participated in community eligibility in the 2023-2024 school year. That's a 20% increase from the prior year, and it's about 74% of all eligible school districts. Next slide, please. The school level. So we know CEP has been available nationwide for a decade now. So this chart shows you adoption at school level from the 14-15 school year up through last school year. Over 47,000 schools participated in community eligibility last school year. That's about a 19% increase in the number of schools from the previous year. And most impressive to me, that is half of all schools operating the National School Lunch Program. 1 in 2 schools that operate the National School Lunch Program utilize CEP to offer free school meals to all of their students. Next slide, please. That 47,766 schools represents about 85% of all CEP eligible schools. And when we look at top performing states, according to adoption levels, we have North Dakota at the top of the charts. 100% of CEP eligible schools adopted CEP in North Dakota last school year. New Mexico and New York, over 99% of their eligible schools adopted CEP. Virginia and Louisiana, over 98% of their eligible schools adopted CEP. And we'll get into some reasons as to what is driving this adoption. Next slide, please. Again, when we ask for participation data from state agencies, we asked for schools' identified student percentage. We asked for their poverty level and ideally the percentage that the schools use to claim federal free reimbursement. And it's no surprise that the more money a school gets from the federal government, the more likely they're going to adopt CEP. It is more financially viable for them to implement CEP at that highest level of federal reimbursement. So you see here on the pie chart, nearly 50% of the schools that participated in CEP last year had almost all of their meals reimbursed at that federal free rate. So they had an ISP that was greater than 60%. About another quarter of schools that adopted last school year were in between a 50 and 60% ISP range, with the remainder below 50% ISP. So it makes sense, right? The more financial money that you're able to get from the federal government to implement the program, the better off you are going to be, the more successful the program is going to be, and the more able you are to implement CEP. But every year we see continued increases in schools adopting at these lower ISP levels. Next slide, please. And students. The reason we do all of this is for the children themselves. And so this chart shows you that 10-year growth in the number of students attending CEP schools. So in the first year it became available nationwide, we had about 6.6 million children attending a CEP school. Last year, we had 23.6 million children having access to free school meals thanks to CEP. That's nearly a 4 million children increase from the previous school year. Next slide, please. So here we are. Why is this growth happening? 2 main factors driving CEP adoption are state policy and Medicaid direct certification. So let's get into it a little bit. Next slide, please. Looking at state policies, 4 new states implemented healthy school meals for all in the 23-24 school year. And many of that state legislation is written in a way that encourages CEP adoption by requiring schools to maximize federal reimbursement. So as states pass healthy school meals for all policies, they are really driving schools towards CEP adoption. So you can see the number of additional schools and the percent growth for Colorado, Michigan, Minnesota, and New Mexico. There's other sets of states like New York, Washington, and Oregon that don't have healthy school meals for all policies yet, but they do have CEP subsidy policies, meaning that when a school is eligible to participate in CEP, the state will cover the difference between the federal free reimbursement rate and the federal paid reimbursement rate. And these policies vary a little bit from each state, But New York implemented this policy in 23-24, and you can see that tremendous growth in CEP adoption after that policy was enacted. An additional 1,000 schools, and nearly a 40% growth in the number of schools adopting after that policy became available. And it makes sense, right? If you're making the school whole, if you're providing them the financial needs that they need to operate the program, they're more likely to operate the program. Next slide, please. So we're just going to look at a few of these states to see the change in adoption over time. So these charts look back from the 2019-2020 school year until last school year. And you can see in New York, there was almost a leveling between the 2019-2020 and 22-23 school year, even a little dip during 21-22 when we had those federal waivers allowing all schools to serve free school meals. The policy passes and is enacted in 23-24, and boom, their CEP adoption rate soars to 4,200 schools. Next slide, please. Same thing for Colorado, right? Colorado passed Healthy School Meals for All that encouraged CEP adoption. They had been staying pretty flat at around 100 schools participating per year. The policy is enacted, and they go up to 588 schools implementing CEP. Next slide, please. Michigan, very similar story, right? They had stayed around 1,400 schools, 1,500 schools between 2021 and 22-23. They implement a Healthy School Meals for All policy that supports schools, supports school budgets, allows for more schools to participate in the program, and their participation jumps as well. Next slide, please. The next driving factor that really led to an increase in CEP adoption last school year was Medicaid direct certification. We know that when you match students for free school meals using Medicaid and household income data, you are streamlining their eligibility, you're streamlining the process for schools, you're reducing burdens on both families and schools, you're increasing program integrity through the process of direct certification, and you are making CEP a more viable option. When states implement Medicaid direct certification, more schools become eligible for CEP, and CEP schools get higher rates of federal reimbursement, which makes them more likely to adopt. So you can see here the states that implemented Medicaid direct cert in the 22-23 school year, how many additional schools came on last school year, and that percentage growth. Next slide, please. So looking at just a handful of these states, just like we did for state policy, Alabama was around 500 schools prior to their Medicaid direct cert. They implement Medicaid direct cert in 22-23, and over 1,000 schools participated in CEP last school year. Next slide, please. Same thing for Louisiana. Louisiana already had a high level of CEP adoption. Their schools were already on board. Those who could operate the program, for those schools that it was financially viable, they were already participating. They really had embraced CEP early on. In 22-23, they implement Medicaid direct cert, and that increases their number even more. More schools become eligible for CEP, and those that were eligible previously got higher rates of federal reimbursement, making it more likely for them to adopt. Next slide, please. South Carolina, another example. And you can see all these examples in our report and in our database for the states that did Medicaid direct cert and the states that have state policy. Same thing with South Carolina, though. We're about 500, 550 schools participating in CEP in the years prior to Medicaid direct cert. They implement Medicaid direct certification. Their number jumps to nearly 1,000. Next slide, please. So what do we recommend as an organization to really strengthen and expand CEP? We know that this program is vital to students' health and their academic achievement. We know it creates hunger-free schools, and we know it's smart businesses for schools. So how do we make sure that all eligible schools are able to participate in this vital program? Next slide, please. First, implementing Medicaid direct certification in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. Currently, there are 43 states, so the overwhelming majority of states are implementing Medicaid direct certification. However, there are 7 states and DC that are not. So USDA is accepting applications right now. It's on a rolling and ongoing basis to implement Medicaid direct certification in future school years. It really strengthens the viability of CEP, it increases program integrity, and it better links eligible students to free school meals. Next slide, please. Expanding CEP access to more eligible schools. There were a number of bills proposed in the 118th Congress that really look to strengthen CEP through a variety of mechanisms, such as statewide grouping, direct certification with SSI or Medicaid Direct Cert. But one of the most instrumental pieces that we need to push Congress to do is to increase the CEP multiplier. Right now, the CEP multiplier, which is the multiplier that determines the rate of federal reimbursement for a school, is set at 1.6. We are calling on Congress to increase that multiplier to 2.5 in order to ensure that all CEP eligible schools are able to operate the program. Without an increase to that multiplier or without additional financial assistance, many newly eligible schools will not be able to implement CEP. Next slide, please. And lastly, we call for universal free school meals, healthy school meals for all. CEP is an important step towards healthy school meals for all, but every child in every state should have access to the nutrition they need to learn and thrive. So we call on Congress to implement a Universal Free School Meals Program Act and create healthy school meals for all, making it a reality nationwide. Next slide, please. We have a variety of resources for you at FRAC, all on the community eligibility provision, school breakfast, and school lunch. Right here, you see the landing page for our community eligibility report. Here you can access key findings from the report as well as the report itself. Next slide, please. We also have a CEP database. So all of the data that we collected and scrubbed and merged is available for you to peruse at your leisure. You can go to our CEP database. You can filter by state, by school district, by eligibility level or ISP level. You can look at both participating and non-participating schools, and you can see which schools in your district are eligible to participate and which schools are already participating and at what levels. This database is also available for download, so if you'd like to do any kind of data manipulation yourself, go for it. Let us know what you use the data for. I'm always excited to see how the data is being used. Next slide, please. And lastly, we have a community eligibility website, which really houses a variety of resources. It has links to the database. It has links to the current research. It also has fact sheets and resources all on specific topics, such as implementing at lower ISPs, improving direct certification, and the Medicaid demonstration project. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's open it up for Q&A. I see some coming through here. Oh, ISP, what does ISP stand for? So ISP stands for Identified Student Percentage. It is the percent of total enrollment. It's the percent of students who are eligible for free school meals through means other than a meal benefit application. So when an individual student becomes eligible for free school meals, they either become eligible through a school meals application that needs to be collected and processed and verified, and that's like a household income application, or they become eligible through a process called direct certification. It's a data matching process where if a student is participating or the household is participating in something like SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, they're automatically eligible for free school meals. ISP is really the basis of how CEP schools are reimbursed. So if you're brand new to community eligibility and you're not quite sure on how it all works kind of behind the scenes or how schools are reimbursed, I encourage you to read our report because we do have sections in the report about that. Go to our website and you can email us. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have and refer you to some of our previous webinars that we've done on the basics of CEP and how you figure out calculations and grouping and all of that kind of stuff. What is the reality of a multiplier increase given the new admin and no farm bill? So the multiplier would not be in the farm bill. I believe it's in CNR, Child Nutrition Reauthorization. But we have to see, at FRAC, we work with every administration. We work with all political parties because our mission always remains the same, and that's to end hunger in America. So I think that everybody across the board, regardless of political party, is invested in making sure that we have a healthy and secure nation and that we have children that don't go hungry. So I think that we will continuously push to strengthen schools' abilities to implement CEP and to really make healthy school meals for all a reality nationwide. Question, is there currently an advocacy push for statewide CEP eligibility? So I believe this is in regards to grouping. So right now, schools are able to group different schools together in order to make schools eligible for CEP or to maximize federal reimbursement. That grouping technique is currently limited to the district level. There were bills introduced in the 118th Congress that would allow for statewide grouping or across district groupings. So we have some more information on that and some of the bills we're supporting pages and fact sheets and handouts that we have on our website. And if you're interested in reading some of that legislative language on what those proposed bills said, please feel free to reach out and I will get them for you. Can you speak a bit more to the challenges of implementing CEP at a lower ISP and what strategies you have found to be successful in getting those districts to implement? Sure. So the way that federal reimbursement works is that a school would take their ISP, multiply it by that multiplier of 1.6, and that is the amount of, that's the percent of meals served that are reimbursed at the federal free rate. So the higher ISP, or the more poverty that you have in your school, the more federal dollars you are going to get into your school, and the easier it is to cover costs of food costs, labor costs, overhead costs, all of the costs of running school nutrition operations. When your ISP or your poverty level gets lower and lower, then the amount of federal money that you get gets lower and lower. So some schools may struggle to implement CEP and offer free meals to all students at lower rates of federal reimbursement. We don't have a ton of data right now at that 25 to 40% range, but we do see a lot of schools implementing at 40 to 50% and the 50 to 60% ISP range. And what school districts repeatedly say are a few things. One, maximizing direct certification. So making sure that schools are doing direct certification as frequently as possible and making sure that they're capturing all eligible categories to really bump up ISP. And that's often done in conjunction with outreach, say SNAP outreach or Medicaid outreach, to really kind of boost ISP levels and make sure that every eligible child is being captured in that direct certification process. Grouping is another strategy that schools are using to really maximize ISP and make more schools able to participate in the program, and schools that are already eligible to participate, it's going to maximize their federal reimbursement so that it becomes more financially viable to implement. Lastly, I cannot stress enough the importance of increasing breakfast participation. Every time I talk with a school district that's operating in that 40 to 50% ISP range, and I ask them how they do it, they say we implement breakfast after the bell strategies. By increasing breakfast participation, you're really kind of increasing, your overall participation, and you can see giant growth in school breakfast participation. So when you pair CEP and free breakfast with breakfast after the bell, you can significantly increase participation in the school breakfast program. Do schools need to actively collect student meal benefit applications if they go to CEP? No. So this is one of the main benefits for CEP for food and nutrition services. When you switch to CEP, you no longer collect school meal applications. Your way that you count and claim meals transitions to this ISP times the multiplier. So when a school embraces CEP and they elect to participate in CEP, they no longer collect school meal applications. That being said, the data collected in those school meal applications are often used for other areas within a school system, right? That data can be used for state education funding. It might be used for textbooks or other benefits. So we do see states and schools that no longer collect school meal applications, but then may enact like a household income application, just so they still have access to that data, so students and families and schools can still get other benefits. But they can no longer do a school meal application. Right, so we are almost right at time at 3:30. I'm not sure if I got to everyone's questions. If I did not get to your question and I missed it, next slide, please, Steve. Oh, feel free to reach out, contact us, and we will be sending a follow-up email for everyone who registered. In that email, you should get my email address and you can reach out directly, and I would be happy to continue the conversation. Thanks again for all your help and support, and we look forward to expanding CEP participation into the next school year. Have a great day.